Welcome back to the Barely Passable channel. So, like a lot of you out there, I have been closely following Brandon Herrera, aka the AK Guys, run for Congress. He is running for the United States House of Representatives for a district in Texas. Now, I don't live in the district, and since, unlike the other Brandon, he is not big on out-of-state and or dead and or fake and or illegitimate voters, I will not be able to vote for him regardless of my opinion of him, but I have really liked his campaign so far. So he has made some videos about it, has a campaign website. He seems to be taking it really seriously, and it's a great thing to see, new people jump up in primary establishment Republicans or just candidates who are not very good for one reason or another. In this case, the incumbent is a Republican, but has had a very poor voting record on the Second Amendment. So overall, I've really enjoyed Brandon's campaign, and I've loved his content for a long time, well before he actually started any kind of political endeavors. There was, however, one thing that I did disagree with him on, at least in part, though I think our opinions on a personal level are probably fairly similar, and that is the issue of abortion and the pro-life issue. Now, I want to look at his website right off the bat just to make it clear exactly what he said on this issue and what his stance is. So on his website, there's a whole page of his opinions on all different issues that he's running on, and abortion is one of them. So he says, and I quote, "The Supreme Court was absolutely correct in ruling that the Roe v. Wade case resulted in bad legislation. The federal government has no right to legislate on things outside of its purview, which is why issues such as abortion are to be decided only by the states themselves." In addition to this, in a Q&A that occurred at this point, I believe it was a few weeks back, he received a question on abortion as well that went like this.
Evil as abortion. Yeah. Why should we just leave it up to these, why do we chalk it up to these silly libertarian stuff like states' rights and federalism?
Because it's not silly, it's the Constitution.
Well,
so the Constitution
killing hundreds of thousands of unborn children. Who cares about the Constitution at that point?
That is a dangerous position to take.
Now it comes to abortion.
Who cares about the Constitution is a slippery slope, because the Constitution is... Well, the Constitution is the only document. People don't really get to see this. And I'll give you an answer that you like a little bit better than that in a second. But we should be very careful about throwing away the Constitution, because the Constitution is the only piece of paper that separates the government from a gang that just happens to have territorial control over the country, which, they don't make the distinction easy themselves sometimes. But
Now, first of all, I want to say I don't disagree with Brandon's response to the student in this video. Ignoring the Constitution and the checks and balances that are present in our government simply to get a positive outcome on an issue is not the direction I would ever advise any conservative or libertarian taking. And I don't think that's a nonsensical opinion or something that is dogmatic or clinging to foolish ideals. Checks and balances and limited government power are there for a reason. However, I would take issue with Brandon's assertion that the federal government doesn't have purview over this issue. First of all, let's look at historical context of the issue of life and how the federal government has handled other similar issues. So, if you look at more liberal sources, they're going to tell you that abortion has always been a thing and that it's always been as popular and handled in the exact same way it is today. Now, that's not really true. Abortion as we know it today was really popularized in the 1900s, in the time leading up to Roe v. Wade. Now, abortion has been present well before that, and it was an issue in the past, but not to the same degree that it is today. So trying to find the founders' opinions on abortion and statements on abortion is not really going to be something that you can do simply because it wasn't an issue the same way it is today back then. However, there was, generally speaking, an understanding of life in the womb and a legal recognition of that. Now, at the time, they used the quickening, or the first movements of the baby, to determine the beginning of life, as that was the understood and only real provable way of a pregnancy, of a living baby being in the womb. However, given our modern understanding of fetal development and life in the womb, we can see a much, much clearer image of when life begins. Now, first of all, we can see a number of benchmarks of life that we use to observe life in already born humans, such as a heartbeat, cardiac activity, nervous system activity, and brain activity. A lot of these begin very, very early in the pregnancy, but we also have an understanding of the creation of life and the creation of unique DNA. The unique human being is created at conception. All of your DNA is created and a new life begins. If you read a biology textbook about reproduction in mammals, you're going to see that the wording describes the creation of life at conception. Most pro-abortion activists choose to ignore the fact that scientifically we understand life beginning at conception because it's not convenient to their cause. So, we have a perfect historical analog for the issue of abortion in the slavery issue. At the time, there was far less understanding of biology, and many people who were pro-slavery even argued that people of African descent were a different species or different subspecies, which, given our current understanding of biology and genealogy, is nonsense. Now, a lot of the founders were very clear in their opinion that slavery should be completely outlawed at a federal level, and that they saw it as being in the purview of the federal government, as it was their job to protect constitutional rights and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That was their sole job, and of course, protecting the rights of all people falls into that, regardless of their skin color, and, for my argument, whether they're born or not. Now, as to why they didn't, there were a number of issues that caused them to avoid touching on slavery during the creation of America. A lot of it came down to its popularity and a desire to unite the colonies. They were concerned that if they tried to outlaw slavery, some of the colonies might not want to join into the Union, and that it may damage their ability to fight Great Britain effectively. Now, there was also a common view that slavery was inefficient and that the practice was going to die out. However, the cotton gin made it far more profitable, so their predictions on the issue didn't necessarily hold true. As time went on, the issue became more contentious and more hotly debated, and eventually, of course, slavery was outlawed. Now, I would certainly hope to avoid a civil war on the issue of abortion, but the significance of the issue of slavery on the abortion debate is simply that people recognized that slavery was a federal issue. The protection of life and the protection of the rights of individuals was an issue in which the federal government has a right to step in and make sure that states are protecting their citizens' rights. And given our current understanding of development in the womb, and the very strong argument that life begins at conception, it would be very difficult to say that it is not an issue of life or death and not in the purview of the federal government. Now, I am going to try to keep this video pretty brief, but the whole point of it was simply to challenge Brandon with this question. Most of us in the conservative and libertarian, or I'll just say liberty-minded side of things, tend to recognize that one of the only legitimate reasons or purposes of the federal government to exist is to protect the citizens' rights and make sure that life and liberty are preserved, essentially creating an absolute standard of God-given rights, such as the First and Second Amendment, that are held and protected throughout the land, and that do not fall to the states to decide. Given our mutual agreement on that and our understanding of unalienable rights, why would the issue of protection of life in the womb not fall to the federal government, especially when we see other historical examples of debates over whether or not people should be granted full rights being resolved at the federal level. So regardless of where you all come down on this issue, I would like to hear all of your opinions down in the comments, but especially those of you who are pro-life but feel that it should be left to the states. I would like to hear all of your opinions on why you feel that it doesn't fall under an issue of protecting constitutional rights. But regardless, thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in more Barely Passable content, please subscribe or feel free to check out the channel directly. But that's all I've got for you. So thank you and have a good one.